is our first day of our team meeting for the PLD K1 dual language vertical team. And we have a couple of new members. We're lucky to have Laurie Maese for the SPED inclusion and Soledad Muniz for Kinder dual language. So I thought since we have two new team members, I thought we could go back over and talk about what our accomplishments were from last year, so everybody knows kind of where we are now and what we're hoping to build on for this school year. So we have, last year we started out with really trying to focus on increasing student access to academic vocabulary through student-to-student talk. And I think we developed that because of our L's. We have to teach math in their second language in English. And we had a strong concern about their content knowledge being impacted by the access of their language. So some of the things that we did for that was that we used various resources. We used number talks and classroom discussions videos to help us, and we did turn and talk, revoicing, tell me more, use of sentence stems as part of the lesson where the kids actually had to use the sentence stem in their conversation when they were learning the math.
It was just like a hook to get them to speak about the activity.
So let's talk a little bit about what we learned from those experiences for those people that did it last year.
I think that my students learned to be able to talk to each other and express what strategies they were using while solving the problems. They were able to help their bilingual partner by explaining to them how they solved the problem in the student's own language. So that was a plus because then the student was able to eventually pick up the vocabulary.
In English?
In English.
Your L's were able to pick up the vocabulary in English?
Yeah, and started using it.
So I think I noticed more of the target language in use. I still kind of wish my conversations had included more math talk in them. And then I know that we used a lot of tools. So within my science and social studies, the math tools came into play, and they were able to use that discussion to kind of expand their thinking in Spanish, because it was like transferring the concepts that they were learning in English to apply it in their Spanish content.
I saw my kids, you know, I think that one thing that this really helped me establish was a procedure or a routine or an activity that encourages them to talk to each other. So when they had that sentence stem, they were using it to talk. When they had the turn and talk procedure and getting them refocused, because getting 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds refocused and getting them talking on content, on academic language, it doesn't just come naturally, it has to be taught. And then so building those into your classroom provided much more rich conversations about math. And then providing them a tool as in the sentence stem, or a procedure as in turn and talk, or revoicing, or tell me more. It gave them more opportunities to talk. It gave me a bigger focus on, are they using that language? Not just teaching a skill and seeing it done on paper, but are they talking to each other and explaining it? So that's what I saw in my classroom that I'm already using now. So I started that one mid-year, towards the end of the year, last year, after watching you guys do your classrooms and then moving in. And then now I get to start right away in talking about the tell me more and the turn and talk.
And you know, I wasn't aware that you all were doing this turn and talk last year. But I can say in working, because I pull students from your classes and students from other classes, and last year I noticed it, and this year I see they're still doing it. I can, now that I'm aware of this, I've noticed that kids from your room last year, and they do because all the kids are processing, but your former students think out loud. They verbalize, they talk about it, they talk with somebody else. So that skill obviously carried over to this year because they are the ones that are the most verbal and explain it to the partners, even though I've never said, well, turn and talk. When they see somebody struggling, they will, the ones that I'm thinking of now that were from your class, and they do talk. They think out loud and they explain it. So this was eye-opening to me when I see that. I said, I wonder if those kids verbalize much. They process out loud more than the other kids.
And I think for me, I think you just hit upon what was really the most important aspect. Aside what everybody else said, I think I experienced as well, my classroom experience, but I also, that level of student engagement really increased with the talk. They were more interested in math, they wanted to share, they were excited to share, and so they were using more vocabulary to share, but you're right, I became a better conversationalist in my classroom too, through what we were showing the kids how to do. So that was really exciting. So I think we have a lot to build on this year from it.
And I've been doing that, I started that too with my kids, and it's been very simple questions at the beginning so that they're used to talking back and forth, and it really helped when I had the English kids over and I was just speaking Spanish, and those other bilingual kids were able to help each other and filling in of, you know, and they were able to understand. So that's really helpful in any area.
The power of student-to-student conversation is really critical for all students, but particularly for our bilingual setting.
Yes.
Yeah. Acquiring a second language requires that you use the language.
And that's exactly what you're talking about.
And I think you give them a structure in which not to be silent. Because they go through silent periods either if they're learning English or Spanish. But because you've given them a frame, a sentence stem, some kind of process, then they feel more comfortable taking the risk and using the second language.
Yeah, it's given to them. It's given to them to kind of fall back on as like a crutch, which is how we get them to start talking.
Yes.
You know?
And it helps a lot with those kids that are very shy, because then it's easier to talk to another partner than it is to talk to the teacher sometimes.
We had, one of our biggest challenges was how do we measure our last year's success. You know, we all felt it in the classroom, and then other people see it, but how do we measure it? So our idea was that there would be an overall increase in math, and there was. There was at a 5% increase in proficiency in math for L's.
For L's.
So yes. So, and that's been happening over time steadily as we increase these constructivist strategies, I think.
Right.
So this year we've met once before when the whole school was working on developing some goals, and we as a team wanted to continue to build on our K1 dual language goals. And during that meeting we looked at data, discovery data specifically, and we noticed an area of need in our data. And despite our frustrations with that assessment, so we have quite a few frustrations with discovery as an assessment for L's, in the fact that they're listening, it's a passive assessment where they're listening to an English speaker on a computer. And but we felt like the discovery data, in combination with our own classroom formative assessments and our in-class nibbles, showed that counting and cardinality and that bridge from counting to cardinality to operations was an area of need. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody want to talk a little bit about what they're seeing in that specific area about needs?
Well, according to the data that we collected this year with the M class, the students are showing difficulty in those areas at the beginning of the year. The data that I've collected in my classroom one of the test scores that that we're talking about are quantity discrimination, where they're having to look at the numbers and find out which one's the bigger number, which one has more.
And we have that same assessment in first grade.
You do?
Yes.
We do.
I'm sure it's a little bit different, but.
Now, giving it to them right now,
Yeah.
they're not showing them objects. They're not saying, okay, look at these two groups. You know, look at these two groups. Which group of objects is more? They're giving them two numbers. So they're saying, here's an 8, here's a 6. Point to the bigger number. And so I already see that those kids are not seeing 8.
Right.
They're seeing a number. They're not seeing 8 objects. They're not seeing 6. They're not seeing. They're not.
So
connecting.
they're not relating the simple to a quantity.
Right.